me, I know everybody here. So for me, you know, to try and teach you guys or talk to you, you already have heard it. You've been in so many classes, but what I did was I call it Clay Mysteries. And basically what I want to talk about is over the 40 plus years, the challenges, the issues, and you know, just how I resolved a lot of things in my clay work. And so I'm looking around, I see people who've been working much longer in clay than I have.
Okay, so you
We
know.
won't hold it again.
And you know Lee. Oh, God.
So anyway, so basically I'm going to talk about the challenges, the shortcuts, and the issues. And when I decided, I made a conscious decision. Hi. I made a conscious decision to make my life clay work, to make clay work, you know, be a part of my life. And that was a decision made because I just fell in love with throwing. I can still close my eyes and see the potter in the south of France. The very first potter I saw, he was throwing a teapot. And I looked at him and I said, I want to buy that pot. And he said, come back in 6 months. I was so naive. I was just like, I want that pot. But, so that was my first decision, is I really want to make my life about clay. And I just think one of the most important things that I always remind myself is to keep my heart and my mind open, so that when I go and I look at a piece, that I'm not destroyed because it's not up to the standards that I think it should be after 40-some years. You know, that I have those times when my mind is somewhere else. I try and make pots that people want to reach out and touch. For many years, what I've done is, I owe it to Olin Bryant at Austin Peay State University, where I was his helper and kiln firer because he was afraid of kilns. And he got me when I walked into a class that I was not a part of. I was an assistant. And he said, Barbara, tell all these students which pot among all these you like. And I immediately went to one pot, and he goes, okay, why? And I said, I wanted to hold it. You know, so that's what I strive for. I certainly don't succeed often, but
That's a lie.
but 3 weeks ago I was throwing at Reniger's Market in Mount Dora, and I was making just medium-sized bowls. And I threw one bowl, and it was nice. And I thought, ooh, nice rim. Put it aside, and made another bowl about the same size. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And I put it aside, and then I made the third bowl, and when I finished with it, I actually sat back, and I'm like, oh, I like this one. You know what, the continuous curve on the inside, I could put a basketball in it, and it would fit. The rim was nice, the throwing rings were nice, and I actually was like, huh, I did that. But, you know, it's like, there are those pots. When I used to go in North Carolina to a lot of the production potters, they'd have 50, 60, 100 pots on the shelf that they were making through the day. And sometimes I would say, which ones do you like? And they'd go, that one, that one, that one. And they all looked identical. They were all about the same size, but there's just something about certain pieces that you feel like that's well crafted. The walls are even, it's got life in it. So, I'm going to back up a little bit. Do I have a yardstick? So, in the Adirondacks, there's this fabulous man. I don't know if any of you know him. He's a painter and a woodsman, and his name is Jack Ledley. And when I went to see Jack when I lived in the Adirondacks, Jack just pulled out a yardstick, and he goes, and he was about my age, and he goes, Barbara, you see this yardstick? This is a lifespan. I am right here. I've lived all this. I'm here. If I'm lucky, I have this. The female lifespan in the United States is 80.5 years. And yesterday I turned 73. So I have, you know, on the yardstick of life, I'm going to make that count. I'm really going to make this count, you know. And I have 2 booklets I brought. Fred will recognize this one. I believe he got me into this, to go and see this show. It's Phil Rogers. It's from the Pucker Gallery in Boston. And this is a booklet I keep sometimes by my bedside for inspiration. I look at these pieces that Phil makes. I don't try and copy them. I just try and draw strength from them and look at their beauty. And then the other booklet I have, which changes frequently, is a catalog. Just an everyday catalog that I get in the mail. This is from Awe. And this just has some quirky little things in it, like I was taken with these little birds on the front. There are so many contemporary things in here that are made from glass and metal, wood, that you can really just, I mean, these little metal milk pods, you know, they would be fabulous in clay. I'm not a hand builder, but, you know, I love these birds. I just love them. Hi, Rachel. Hi, Barbara.
Barbara, do you think Phil was one that inspired you the most? Like, who do you think inspired you the most?
Cynthia Ringel from 1981. You know, I went to a workshop for 2 weeks and was immersed in clay in Tennessee. And there were 3 pieces. There were 3 clay workers there. There was, and I can never remember his name. He was a sculptor. He's fabulous. He's from New Orleans, and he made life-size animals, and he was extremely talented. And Sandy Simon was there. She's now in California. And Sandy made functional pieces, but she really loved putting an edge on them. So, like the handle might have a rough spot, or she would leave the rim with just something that I would take a sponge and wipe off. And I mean, they could almost cut you. And I was like, oh, I like her forms. But then there was Cynthia. And how many people here know Cynthia Ringel? Hey man, you know, that mug, you know, it's, no, that's not her. No. She's fabulous, and she's good, basic pots. And she's, hey Mary, and she's still a wonderful, wonderful friend, and she just unloaded her gas kiln yesterday. She's on a couple, I think a stool or 2, and just hundreds of pots that she's made and fired. And she's 83 years old. So basically, the next thing I looked for, the next challenge I had, was to really think about what I wanted to do in clay work. And I could tell from the very beginning I wanted to be a functional potter. I wanted to make things that people eat and drink from. I've never aspired to be in shows or be famous or be up there. I mean, that's why, you know, Empty Bowls. That's why the Clay Guild. That's why the community. It's because if I touched one person or 20 people, you know, I just really, that's my aim in life. And I don't think in that 1.8 inches. I really do not believe it'll change. But so my identity has been functional potter. The next challenge I had everywhere I moved, which I've moved a lot, and I was here for 20 wonderful years. And I will say this is the best clay community I have ever been in. It is unbelievable. It is beyond, it is way above. And I've had some really nice clay communities with wonderful people and good friends. But this community is vibrant, and it's what you've done with Waterbrook and continued on, and you've continued on Empty Bowls, fabulous. I mean, just amazing again. And Pottery Market, I wish I could be here for it. It's just wonderful. So I'm thrilled. And I do want you to know that Will Finkel would be happy to have you guys come up and Fire and Bruno. So studio space. So every place I went, I needed to find a studio space. First I looked in my home, then I looked into the community. And then of course when I got here and met Dennis, well I already knew Dennis, he was my clay supplier. But then, you know, it just took off from there at River Street and 621. In fact, I stopped by there and Monroe today on the way here. A little heartbroken, but you know, it's They did put that highway through.
Oh,
and
they
so,
did?
Yeah, they
Oh,
did
wow.
put it through, and it's lovely. But the building it's adrift. It
Yeah.
just looks like a little island. I stopped where Bruno was and just kind of bowed my head. So that's the first thing I look for is where's my studio space going to be? Where am I going to get my supplies? Then there's always what type of clay I'm going to use, whether I'm going to use earthenware, stoneware, porcelain, what temperature I'm going to fire at, what glazes I'm going to use. And so these are all things. I also have to think about the rhythm and my work schedule, and I'll talk about that in another minute. Some of the physical things that I thought about early on was how to save my body. Because I feel like I've got a farmer's body from my ancestors. So I've got a strong body and I wanted to keep it strong. So what I did was, number one, I try and use soft clay. Number two is when I sit down to throw every time, I mean after all these years, I think about my forearm muscles and my hand muscles. That makes my neck, my back, my shoulders relax. I don't use my biceps if I can help it unless I'm throwing a large piece, but I tense my forearms and my hands. And that really helps, I'm not crimped in the back, I have no issues, and I bring that down to all these years, I haven't been tensing my whole body. Also, I see my chiropractor once a month for maintenance. I found a fabulous chiropractor in Florida. I go every month, he goes, what's wrong? I go, nothing. He goes, okay, let's adjust you, keep you going. And then there's also, after about 8 years of throwing, and I was doing some pretty production, functional pots where I would sit for a long time. I learned to get up every hour, stretch, put my hands above my head, and really stretch my back, my neck, and get moving a little bit and then come back and sit down, because I hate to leave the wheel. All I want to do is throw after all this time. But after about 8 years, I had a persistent aching and pain in my under my hip bone right here, and I kept thinking, I'm getting appendicitis, but no, I didn't know what it was. And for years I'd go around, and every once in a while I'd have this ache, and I was really active. I played squash, I jogged, I played a lot of sports, had young children, but I just had this ache. And then when I moved to New York, I went down to the Omega Institute down south of here, and I went to a massage therapist and got a massage, and he was wonderful. He goes, got any problems? And I said, well, I've got this thing, and he said, oh, that's your psoas muscle. And the psoas muscle is deep down, and it connects a lot, but I'm right-handed, and when I throw, I'm like this. And for the first couple of years, I was bent over like this a lot, and I'd get up and I wouldn't notice anything, but maybe 2 days later, I'd be like, oh man. So he gave me some exercises and stretches to basically stretch my leg back. And I do that occasionally when it hurts. So what I find is really important, it sounds dorky, but I smile when I sit down to throw, and it just lifts my mood. And I know a lot of you know I whistle. I'm a whistler, and it's just weird because in North Carolina, this man came in and he goes, a whistling woman and a clucking hen will come to no good end. And he was a student I was about to teach, and I said, okay. So I whistle, I hum, and I know I'm annoying. I'm a morning person, and I am just like, But I found out about 7 or 8 years ago that Mary Pat, probably, a lot of you probably know, the vagus nerve here goes down, it goes around a lot of the organs, and when I hum and when I whistle, it stimulates the vagus nerve. So be annoying, whistle and hum, because I think that gets your body, it's really important to me, to not be hurting, somewhere, so I can continue to work. The last thing on my challenge list is feeling scattered. There's so many times when I go to throw, and I want to throw, but I'm like, I keep beside my wheel a list of about 30 pieces, 30 different forms, and I'll be damned. I can go there and I can look, I don't want to make mugs, I don't want to make plates, I don't want to make teapots, oh wow, I really want to make platters, and I can go down that list, and before I get even halfway down, I found something that's inspiring me, something I want to do. And that's such an easy shortcut. It's like keeping your thoughts up there on the wall. Shortcuts, I told you I'd talk about rhythm. And my rhythm, and I don't know how long ago, it was probably 30 some years ago, I walked into the studio and I had pots I had to throw, I had pots I had to trim, and I had a whole bunch of bisque pots I needed to glaze. And I'm like, how am I going to go about this? I got a lot of work to do today. And since that day, I have realized that when I walk into the studio, my mind goes, do I need to glaze? No. Do I need to trim? No. Do I need to throw? Yeah. So the reason I do it in that order, is that when you're trimming, you're making a mess. When you're throwing, you're making a mess. I need to be clean. My studio needs to be clean when I'm glazing. I need to sit down. I need to wipe off those pots, wax the bottoms, get the glazes out, clean up that. Then whatever I have to trim, I trim. And then I can throw. So, I don't know if that helps you, but it really helped me, because if I went in there and I started throwing whatever I wanted to throw, and I'm like, whoa, then I've got a mess. And so one of the things, and you'll see, I'm going to demonstrate 3 pots today, if I have time. But when I have a pug of clay, this is a pug of clay, 25 pounds, and I'll push on it. And this is pretty good pug of clay. It's pretty nice and soft. It's B-mix. And I will pick it up and I will throw it on, I'll hold it at my waist and I'll drop it. And I drop it all 4 sides in the bottom. And if you want to push, I don't know, want to push on this, but afterwards it's so much softer. And what happens is when they pug this, they put it in a box with another pug, and they put it on a truck, or it sits in the warehouse, but then they put it on the truck. And it vibrates the whole way here from Ohio. And then it sits maybe for a little bit, and then maybe you put it in your car and take it home. Well, that vibration makes a little skin around the outside. So if you can just knock the pug on the floor, it softens it all up. And it is wonderful. I do not wedge the clay that I take straight from here, but what I do is I cut it into squares and then beat it into rounds. I don't take like a thin 2-inch strip all the way across, because then you fold it, you get air in it and pockets in it. I had a thought and I lost it, something I was going to say. Then I was going to add to this. So hard clay. So you guys know, a lot of you know, that when I left here, I took probably 3 tons of clay with me to Florida. I still have a good deal of it, obviously, and some of it's getting kind of hard, which is fine. At least I have the clay. So what I do is, when I say this 25 pounds is hard, it's too hard for me to throw. And that's another thing. I try and use nice soft clay. And I'm a messy potter. I use a lot of water. I will cut it into about 1.5 pounds, 2 pound squares, and put a little bit of water in a 5-gallon bucket, just randomly put the squares in, sprinkle some water on them, and for a 5-pound bucket, I would do the whole 25 pounds, and just break it up into square pieces, put it in there, spritz it, and then I have a towel that it's completely wet, and I lay it on top, and then I seal the top, and I sit it there for 3 days. After 3 days, I can go in there, and a little bit of it might be kind of mushy, but most of it is ready to use. And I've just found that such a delight, because I don't want to have to hurt my hands. I've never had carpal tunnel, and I know several of you have. I don't want to have the surgery, but I would. Okay, so recycling. Right now I'm in the middle of recycling at home. So I had 7 5-gallon buckets full of scrap clay.
Oh, God.
7, just me. So what I did was put water on the scraps. I didn't try and dry them out. I just put water all the way up to the top, put lids on them, and then I had an empty bucket. And I would scoop out a little bit of the slurry, and then I have a DeWalt, wonderful DeWalt drill with a Jiffy mixer attachment, big old thing, and I put it down in there. And you want to be careful. You don't want to burn up your drill, but it's It's like, what would you say, kind of like oatmeal. It's thicker than pancake batter. And I just go and I just drill and mix each one of those buckets, and I'm filthy by the end, put the top on them, and then when I go back, what I'll do is I have big boards. I don't use plaster in my studio, it's just me. I had a bad experience many years ago with plaster in a community studio. So I use big wood boards, and I'll just slop the clay on there about 4 inches thick, and I'll leave it, cover it at night, go in every day, check it out. When it's ready to wedge, I wedge it up, and then still have Northeast Ceramic Supply big plastic bags. They're like this, and they're nice thick bags. And really learn to spiral wedge, because there's ram's head, which is really hard on your body, your elbows, and there's spiral wedging, which you use your whole body with. And if I have time, I'll show you. But I wedge it up, I put it in bags, probably about 15 to 20 pounds in each bag, seal the bag, and then I put it in, I've got those round rolling 30-gallon containers. I put it in there, leave it for at least 3 months, and it's a dream to throw. So I really like recycled clay. The last thing I do in my studio when I'm finished throwing, I'm finished glazing, is I clean all my tools and I mop my floor. And I've learned over the years, I spend the last half hour of my clay session, I plan. That's my half hour to kind of get myself in tune, and I clean up. And because I know it's going to be a delight when I walk in the next day or the next couple days. So issues, I'm almost down there, I'm almost finished. One of the struggles I've had over the years, not only moving but setting up studios, was lack of time. You know, it's like, when can I throw? When can I work in the studio? And I can bring it down to one sentence: make yourself a priority. You know, make yourself a priority. Make so that, like, you make other people a priority, you make other things a priority, but make yourself a priority. Because if you do that, you will feel lighter, you will be happier, your clay work will probably thank you. So lastly, I'll say, to my clay work experience and career, I find that there's 4 seasons. And my first season, the spring, you know, was learning. It was all about learning. And I was the most boring person. I think for 15 years I did nothing but read about pottery. I did not read Southern Living or anything. It was Ceramics Monthly, Studio Potter, you know, all the clay magazines. I'd go to the post office and stand in line, and I'd have a clay book. And I didn't care how long I waited in line, because I was learning about clay. Don't ask me about what was happening in the world. I didn't listen to news. I'm sitting in the corner just reading about clay work and throwing and learning to center, learning to make pots. Going, you know, I don't know if, what's the name of the place in Syracuse?
Playscape.
No, the gallery.
Everson?
Everson, yeah, go to the Everson if she's open. She's got a great, the Everson Museum has a wonderful, wonderful selection. It's very kind of haphazard, last time I was there, very haphazardly put together. It's not haphazardly put together. It's good, all right. But they have pots, they have historic pots, they have pots that are from the 70s and 80s, they have contemporary work, and it is just, it's like being in a candy store for potters. It is just, you look at something and you go. And I don't imitate. I try very hard. If I see something, I don't want to make this bird on this page. I don't want to make Phil's pots. I'll buy them. I don't want to make them. But I get inspiration from them. So that's the spring. The summer is when I was experimenting. And I was trying raku and pit firing and wood firing and you know, gas firing, electric firing, Egyptian paste, you know, all these different things that are just, there's so much out there. So I did a lot of experimenting, and it overlapped. The learning never stopped. The experimenting has really never stopped. And then the fall of my life, my clay life, has been a flow. you know, and the flow was mostly with you guys. The flow was, you know, getting ready for empty bowls. The flow was making a line of work, teaching a certain class, and then sitting back and saying what I want to do for myself. So that was the flow, wonderful part of my clay life. And then the winter, which is now, is summing up, you know, because, I mean, I come back to New York and I got older, you know. You know, I've been here 2 days and I increased a whole year. But, you know, the winter of my life, you know, it's just like, it's the yardstick. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna live it to its fullest. But any questions? Because I mean, I went over this for several weeks. What do I need to say?
What's your favorite kind of clay, Barbara, and what clay do you absolutely not feel like you want to touch?
Best clay, there are so many, but I basically right now fire to cone 5, 6, and I love 50. I really love 50. B-Mix is phenomenal. I remember when Dennis brought a pug of B-Mix into me, and into my studio 12, 15 years ago, and he said, this is a new clay Laguna wants me to carry, try it out. I was astonished. You know, it just flowed. It just, you know, I put it on the wheel and I centered it and it kept going and going and going and pulling out. So B-Mix is excellent. It depends upon what you're making. If I'm going to make platters and large pieces, I definitely want grog in there. If I'm going to make really big pieces, you know, I'll use something with 20% grog. The clay I don't want to touch is, what's it called? It's from Australia. The ice, anybody know?
Frost.
Frost. Frost just, you know, you can't recycle frost. It's like, it shivers off like in slabs. It's like, what's shale? It's like shale when you try and recycle that sucker. But it's beautiful. It's like, it's the color of your mask when it's fired. It's that really beautiful light blue, your mask, yeah. Your mask. It's just, it is a beautiful, beautiful clay. And there's a cone 10, and there's a cone 5, 6, and I've thrown with it, and it's just, now 550 is a cone 10 porcelain that I adore. And and I would tell you that if you're using a red clay, no matter whether it's earthenware or mid-fire stoneware, 550, you can make a slip of 550, and I've never had a clay body that it shivers off of. I tried once, and I put 8 layers on before it would shiver off. But 550 clay, you can get it dry, and you can get it wet and sieve it and make a nice slip out of it. So if there are no more questions, I would say being in a community studio is wonderful, but do you know how often I clean my wheel at home? I go from porcelain to red clay to, you know, to stoneware to back and forth, and that splash pan has everything in it. And I figure after a while the porcelain will come out, you know, it's just like, it's okay. And I recycle all of it together. Cone 5, cone 6, porcelain, and I fire her right up to 10 because I put a dry cone 10 clay into it. And I think that's part of it. I really love, if you're in a community studio, you got to go by the rules. You got to go by the overall. In fact, I think I was telling Elizabeth or Maureen at the very beginning when I first came to River Street, which a lot of you are from those days, 2000, 2001. Oh my gosh, long time. And I said to Dennis, oh, we'll just make it a co-op. And he goes, won't work. It won't work, Barbara. He goes, you got to have somebody to make that final decision. I am so pleased that this co-op is working. I know it's a lot about, I like having my own studio. And I think that's my selfish part, is I want my own space. But if I could not have that, let's say, I mean, when I moved, I wasn't sure exactly, before I moved, I wasn't sure if I go into an apartment. I mean, one of my options was do I move downtown Troy and get an apartment? And if so, I would be in this studio, you know, and I would be firing, you know, 5, 6. I'd be ordering from Clayscapes, and I would be, you know, cleaning up my wheel.